The biennial Summit Africa Week 2025, Global Security, Global Africa, currently running at the University of Pretoria Future Africa campus, brings together African and global science leaders to discuss broadening the definition of global security and Africa's role within it. The purpose of the summit is to reframe and broaden global security beyond its militaristic confines. To tell us more about the gathering and the expected level of engagement, we're now joined by Professor Maano Ramutsindela, Future Africa's Research Chair in Sustainability Transformations. Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on the late edition. Now, before we get to the summit itself and the kind of engagement or level of engagement that's expected, let's start with just your views on Africa Day and its significance.
Thank you very much for having me on your show. Africa Day it's important, perhaps more important than we think about it. It's celebrating what the heroes and heroines have done to get us where we are today. But it is also a moment of reflection. What made them do what they did? What type of commitment did they make? What are the sacrifices that they made? It's also a moment for us to reflect about what our priorities should be as we move this continent forward. So I think that it's important for us to celebrate this day, to think more deeply about what it means. What would have happened to this continent if this day did not usher in?
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for us to think about that as well.
Mm-hmm. And then to the summit itself, which has a focus around global security and Africa being part of the globe. Just talk to us about the summit.
The summit, which takes place every 2 years at the University of Pretoria, is a gathering of people who are concerned about African issues at a global level and how to tackle them. So it is not simply talking about the challenges that we face, but to think together about what we need to do to resolve them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these challenges have been there for a while, and we need to think about why they persist. So at this summit, we have chosen the theme of global security and the role of Africa in that security infrastructure. So global security has always been thought about in terms of the military.
Yeah.
That we can resolve the problems through the barrel of the gun. But the security issues of today are more complex than we think about. Cybersecurity is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who are thinking about refugees as a security problem in their own countries, and that's why they don't want them to cross the borders. We also have technology, which has become a major part of our life,
mm-hmm.
but it's also a threat to some of the things that we do as humans.
Yeah. So now when we speak about some of these threats, especially when you talk technology, I mean, many have been speaking about artificial intelligence, that here when you talk about it, of course, we must embrace this revolution. But nevertheless, many have questioned whether we are prepared even as a continent for those threats that you touch on.
We are not, we are far behind in terms of these technologies. And we need to invest in them. I'm in Kigali as I speak now, and we have just been talking about artificial intelligence and where Africa is right at the bottom when it comes to advancement in this generative technologies. What we need to do is to begin to understand how it would work for us. One of the strongest messages that was put across is that we don't have to say we need to catch up with the rest of the world. We need to determine our priorities and how to achieve them using technologies. Mm-hmm. That will help us to sit, not to chase, not to be in the game of just being one of them, but to use technology to be able to advance our own securities and to use our strategies in Africa as a contribution to the security of the world. So we shouldn't see ourselves as simply the victim of what is going on globally, but how we could contribute to the solutions ourselves as Africans.
Now, Professor, we understand that this specific summit will be attended by invite only. Who are some of the keynote speakers that are expected?
We have, I should say that this is organized with the support of the National Research Foundation and Science and Technology. And so we're going to have, tomorrow, the lecture that Professor Adam Habib will deliver. And this is just to set the tone. We have invited a number of people from the rest of the continent and also outside the continent who are concerned with African issues. It is a forum for us to think together and to decide on the course of action that we can then help our own countries to think about these options that we have in terms of security. I'll give you an example. We haven't thought much about social cohesion as a social security issue.
Yeah.
We haven't thought about society itself, how it is being torn apart, and how that becomes a threat to the countries, to the regions, and to the rest of the world. So we need to reframe security to include a number of elements, and that's what we're hoping to do during this summit.
You touch on a very important point when it comes to social cohesion, because we've seen many regions unravel, but even in South Africa right now, we've seen how the lack of effort when it comes to social cohesion has led to a very polarized South Africa. We're divided racially in most instances at times. So what needs to be done, honestly speaking? What would be your input insofar as paying greater attention or putting more effort to ensure that we are reconciled as South Africans firstly?
That's a very good question, but also a difficult one to answer. I would say that there are examples of how other countries on the continent have resolved social cohesion issues. If we take Tanzania, for example, it has been a model of how we could work towards that and how we need to invest in many dimensions of human life in order to achieve that. And I'm not saying that these are perfect examples, but we should be able to read into the kind of strategies that other countries that have succeeded have done in order for us to learn from them. But we should also, as a country, avoid the polarization that is happening. I know we've got so many issues that are historical, most of them that keep coming back and drawing us backward. What we need to do is why do these things happen? Why is society so polarized? What are the structural elements that are helping the society to be so polarized? And I'm not talking here about just one thing, but the structures of society as a whole, the way we govern ourselves, the way we distribute resources, the way we think about ourselves, the way we talk about others. So it's quite important to think about those key elements that make people feel that they are not part of this society. I could just give an example. Yesterday I was at the Genocide Memorial here in Kigali. And it came to my mind that the way people thought about each other was so detrimental to the whole society. So what we need to do in the country is to think about how we build the society and what are the instruments that we need, what are the resources that we need, intellectually and materially, in order to help us advance the cohesion that we want to achieve.
And I suppose, Professor, And I suppose, Professor, there would be those that would say they need to see meaningful transformation, that if we're still so deeply polarized, it's because of the slow pace to transform and ensure that everybody, all citizens actually are participating in the economy, because many still remain on the periphery. And I suppose that's what leads to some of the divisions.
That's very true. I would suggest that we need to think about cohesion, social cohesion, economic elements to that part, the education part. We need to think about bringing the society together in terms of the materiality of life. So what is happening at different levels? What is happening in the villages where it is day zero every day? Okay, and how will these people feel that they're part of this society, where people, they see others who are just enjoying life? And I think that lack of consciousness is the one that keeps polarizing us. It is the one that helps those who are on the margins to think that they are not counted among those, they are not counted as part of the society. Now, I don't want to go into the area of the racial division, because that's quite an open book for most of us. What we need to do, to think about, are the levels at which we need to build the society. There are national policies, but we cannot operationalize them simply at the national level. We need to make them meaningful to where people live, where people find meanings of life. What we have been doing through lack of cohesion, lack of development, and development here, I mean, in a more broader sense of helping people to become themselves and to determine their own future. They cannot do so if they don't have the basic needs that every human being should have. And once we think about those basic needs and be able to do them, if we go back to the RDP, it is beginning to address these basic needs. But what happened to them? And I think what will be very useful for us is to say, for our own security, we need that social cohesion, and invest in that process, and make sure that we understand where it is leading us to.
Yeah, Professor, thank you very much for those insights, and it sounds as though the biennial summit will be quite fruitful. Thank you very much yet again. That's Professor Maano Ramutsindela, Future Africa's Research Chair in Sustainability Transformations.